The phone screen glowed in the darkness of the bedroom, casting pale blue shadows across Emma's face. It was 2:47 a.m., and she'd woken to use the bathroom when she noticed it sitting there on David's nightstand, unlocked and abandoned. He was downstairs. She could hear the faint clink of ice in a glass, the creak of the refrigerator door. She shouldn't look. She knew that. 10 years of marriage had been built on trust, or what she'd believed was trust. But something had been different lately. The way he looked at her sometimes, like he was calculating something. The hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room. The new life insurance policy he'd insisted she sign. Her hand reached for the phone before her mind could stop it. The messaging app was open to a conversation with someone named Jay. No last name, no profile picture, just a single letter that somehow felt more ominous than any name could have been. The break lines are too obvious, David had written 3 days ago. They check for that now. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled up. "What about the stairs?" Jay had replied. "A fall in the home, very common, especially with wine involved. She doesn't drink much anymore, has to be believable." "Then we make it believable. You said she likes hiking. Trails can be dangerous. Rocky terrain, steep drops. People slip all the time." Emma's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to focus on the words that couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. This had to be a joke, some dark humor between friends, a novel they were plotting together, anything but what it appeared to be. But then she scrolled further. "Timeline?" Jay had asked. "Soon. Policy just went active. Need to wait at least a few months so it doesn't look suspicious. Maybe spring." "I'm thinking April. We have that anniversary trip planned to Colorado. Lots of hiking. She loves those mountain trails." April, their anniversary, the trip she'd been looking forward to for months. Smart, grieving husband, tragic accident. You'll walk away with what, $2 million? 2.5, and the house is paid off, plus her retirement accounts, call it 3.2 total. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob that threatened to escape. The phone nearly slipped from her shaking fingers. Downstairs, she heard David's footsteps heading toward the stairs. She quickly set the phone back exactly as she'd found it, screen now dark, and dove back under the covers. Her heart hammered so violently she was certain he'd hear it when he entered the room. She forced her breathing to slow, to maintain the rhythm of sleep. The bedroom door creaked open. David's silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. He stood there for a long moment, too long, just watching her. Emma kept her eyes closed, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Finally, he moved to his side of the bed and climbed in. The mattress shifted with his weight. She felt him settle beside her, so close she could feel the warmth of his body. The body of the man she'd loved for a decade, the man who'd promised to love her in sickness and health, till death do them part. Till death. How literal he'd apparently meant that vow. Emma lay perfectly still, feigning sleep, while her mind raced through everything she thought she knew about her life. About her marriage, about the man sleeping 18 inches away from her, the man who was planning her murder. Morning came with horrifying normalcy. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom curtains. The alarm chirped at 6:30 a.m. as it did every weekday. David rolled over and kissed her forehead, a gesture he'd performed 1,000 times, one that now made her skin crawl. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. Emma forced a smile. "Morning." She watched him dress for work, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. David Chen, 42 years old, finance director at a pharmaceutical company, 6 feet tall, athletic build maintained through regular gym sessions, dark hair graying at the temples, brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, handsome in a distinguished, reliable way. A murderer. The word felt foreign in connection to this man who'd cried at their wedding, who'd held her hand through her father's funeral, who brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings and remembered her mother's birthday, even when Emma forgot. "You okay?" David asked, catching her staring. "You look pale." Didn't sleep well, she said, which was perhaps the most honest thing she'd said in hours. Maybe you should stay home today. Call in sick. He moved closer, reaching for her forehead as if checking for fever. Emma fought the urge to flinch away. You feel a bit warm. Was this it? Was he testing something? Preparing some kind of poison that would start with flu-like symptoms? I'm fine, she said, perhaps too quickly. Just tired. Big presentation today. Can't miss it. Relief, or was it disappointment, flashed across his face. Okay, but take it easy. I worry about you. The audacity of those words. I worry about you. From the man planning to make her death look accidental. Emma showered on autopilot, letting the hot water cascade over her while her mind churned. She needed to think clearly, strategically, but all she could see was that message thread, those casual words discussing her death like they were planning a vacation. People slip all the time. Her hands shook as she dried her hair. She had to be careful. If David suspected she knew, he might accelerate his timeline, or find another way, something more immediate. What was to stop him from pushing her down the stairs this very morning? She dressed conservatively, gray slacks, a navy blouse, checking her reflection in the mirror. Same face as yesterday, but everything had changed. The woman looking back at her was someone whose husband wanted her dead, someone who had to pretend everything was normal while sleeping next to a killer. How long? How long had he been planning this? Downstairs, David had made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, fresh coffee, another normal morning ritual that now felt sinister. Emma stared at the plate he set before her. Not hungry? He asked. Just the coffee, she managed. She couldn't eat. The thought of food made her nauseous, but she couldn't raise suspicion either. My stomach's a bit off. That flu is going around. David sat across from her, eating his own breakfast with disturbing normalcy. Maybe you did pick something up. Emma lifted the coffee mug with both hands to hide their trembling. She watched him over the rim. Looking for what? Signs of a murderer? He looked the same as always. Maybe a bit more cheerful than usual, but he'd been in a good mood all week. She'd thought it was because of a bonus at work. Now she wondered if it was anticipation. So I've been thinking about our anniversary trip, David said casually, buttering his toast. I found some great trails around Telluride, really spectacular views. There's this one called Bear Creek Falls. It's supposed to be breathtaking. Breathtaking. What a choice of words. Sounds nice, Emma heard herself say. It'll be perfect. Just the two of us, away from everything. Like a second honeymoon. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip familiar. I can't wait. Emma's mind replayed the messages. Lots of hiking. She loves those mountain trails. Me neither, she lied, looking into the eyes of the man who'd vowed to love her forever, seeing only a stranger who'd put a price tag on her life. $3.2 million to be exact. Emma waited until David left for work before she moved. She stood at the window, watching his silver BMW pull out of the driveway, disappear down the tree-lined street. Only then did she allow herself to collapse onto the sofa, her entire body shaking with suppressed terror. She had to think, had to plan. First question. Was she absolutely certain? Could there be any other explanation for those messages? She grabbed her own phone with trembling fingers and read through the thread again, having taken careful photos in the bathroom mirror while David showered. Number. There was no other interpretation. The messages were clear, methodical, horrifyingly explicit in their intent. Second question. Who was Jay? Emma opened her laptop and began searching. David's contacts, social media, email accounts, at least the ones she could access. She knew his passwords for most things. He'd never been secretive before. Or maybe he had been, and she'd just been too trusting to notice. She found nothing. No Jay in his contact list, no obvious connections. Whoever this person was, David had been careful to keep them separate from his regular life. Third question. When had this started? Emma thought back over the past months, searching for clues she'd missed. The life insurance policy came first to mind. David had brought it up in November, right around Thanksgiving. "We should update our insurance," he'd said over dinner. "We're not getting any younger." "It's responsible." She'd agreed without much thought. Of course they needed life insurance. Everyone did. The agent had come to the house. David had been present for all the paperwork. It had all seemed so normal, so responsible. What else? What other signs had she missed? The gym membership he'd insisted on buying her in December, even though she'd said she preferred hiking to working out indoors. "It's important to stay active," he'd said. "Keep yourself healthy." Keep herself insurable, more likely. The casual conversations about updating their wills, the suggestion that she quit her stressful job. "I make enough for both of us, honey. You should enjoy life more. Enjoy life while it lasted, apparently." And then there were the smaller things. The way he'd encouraged her to take up hiking more seriously. "You need a hobby," he'd said. "Something adventurous. You're always talking about wanting to explore more trails." Setting the stage, she realized now, making it believable that she'd die on one. Emma felt sick. How long had he been planning this? Months? Years? She opened a new browser window and searched for information about insurance fraud, staged accidents, murder investigations. The statistics were chilling. Intimate partner homicide was more common than she'd ever imagined. And the methods, poison, staged accidents, deliberate crashes, read like a handbook for the messages she'd found. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "Thinking about you. Hope you're feeling better. Love you." 3 words that used to make her smile now felt like a threat, or a mockery. Did he love her? Had he ever? Or had their entire marriage been a lie leading to this moment? Emma forced herself to respond. "Love you too. Feeling better. Long day ahead." She stared at the screen after sending it, playing along, pretending, the role she'd have to maintain until she figured out what to do, because going to the police wasn't simple. She knew that from her years as a paralegal before she'd moved into corporate compliance. She'd seen cases thrown out for lack of evidence, seen marriages destroyed by false accusations. And she had what? Some text messages that could be explained away as fiction writing or dark jokes? No proof of actual planning, no murder weapon, no concrete evidence of intent that would hold up in court? If she went to the police and they couldn't arrest him, David would know she knew. And then what? Would he play the victim, claim she was unstable, paranoid? Or would he simply accelerate his plan? Number. She needed more. She needed to understand the full scope of his plan, identify his accomplice, and build an irrefutable case. She needed evidence, and she needed to survive. Emma spent the rest of the morning deep in research. She learned about brake line tampering, staircase accidents, hiking deaths. She read about life insurance policies, payout timelines, fraud investigations. She discovered that most murderers who staged accidents made mistakes. They were either too obvious or too complicated. David was being smart, waiting months, creating a believable narrative, planning it for a location away from home where accidents were genuinely common. But smart criminals still made mistakes. She just had to find his. By noon, Emma had formed the outline of a plan. She would document everything. She would investigate Jay's identity. She would figure out exactly how David intended to kill her. And she would build a case so solid that when she finally went to the police, there would be no question of his guilt. But first, she had to stay alive. And she had to do something even harder. She had to keep loving him, or pretending to, every single day until she had what she needed. The next weeks passed in surreal slow motion. Emma became 2 people. The loving wife who smiled and kissed her husband goodbye each morning, and the investigator who documented his every move, searching for more evidence of his murderous intent. She installed a tracking app on his phone while he showered, hiding the icon in a folder of unused apps. She set up notifications for when he left work, arrived at unusual locations, stayed anywhere for extended periods. She began keeping a detailed journal, writing down every suspicious comment, every strange behavior, every piece of the puzzle she was slowly assembling. The hardest part was the acting. Pretending normalcy while sleeping beside someone who wanted her dead required a level of performance Emma hadn't known she possessed. But survival instinct was a powerful motivator. "You seem happier lately," David commented one evening over dinner. They were at their favorite Italian restaurant, the same place he'd proposed a decade earlier. "More like your old self." Emma had been making an effort to seem normal, whatever normal meant anymore. "I think it's the spring weather, and I'm excited about our trip." The trip to Colorado. Now just 6 weeks away. The deadline looming over everything. "Me too." David reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture she'd once found romantic. Now it felt like a countdown. It's going to be perfect. Just what we need. What he needed, Emma thought. What she needed was to still be alive on the other side of it. "I've been thinking," David continued. "Maybe we should make it a longer trip. Take 2 weeks instead of 1. Really disconnect from everything. More time to stage an accident. More isolation. More opportunity." "That sounds wonderful," Emma lied smoothly. "But I don't think I can get that much time off." "You could quit," David said, not for the first time. "I've been doing the math. We don't need both incomes. You're always stressed about work. This could be the year you finally pursue something you're passionate about. Or the year he'd collect on her life insurance and didn't need her income anymore." "Maybe," Emma said non-committally. "Let me think about it." She watched him smile, satisfied, and wondered what was going through his mind. Did he feel guilty? Did he lie awake at night wrestling with his conscience? Or had he compartmentalized so effectively that he could plan her murder while discussing vacation plans and career changes? Emma's phone buzzed. A notification from the tracking app. David had stopped at an unfamiliar address 3 days ago during his lunch break. She'd meant to investigate but hadn't had the chance. Later that night, after David fell asleep, Emma sat in the bathroom with her laptop balanced on her knees, researching the address. It was a coffee shop in a neighborhood 20 minutes from David's office. Why had he gone there? Who had he met? She cross-referenced the date with his calendar. Nothing scheduled for that time. A secret meeting, then. Possibly with Joe. Emma made a note to visit the coffee shop herself. Maybe they had security cameras. Maybe someone had seen David with his mystery accomplice. It was a long shot, but she was running out of time and needed answers. She was also running out of emotional reserves. The constant vigilance, the perpetual acting, the weight of knowing. It was exhausting. She'd lost weight. Wasn't sleeping. Her boss had commented on her distraction at work. "Everything okay at home?" Karen had asked yesterday, genuine concern in her voice. Emma had smiled. "Everything's fine, just tired." How do you tell someone your husband is planning to kill you? How do you admit you're living a nightmare while maintaining the facade of a normal life? She couldn't. Not yet. Not until she had proof. Emma closed her laptop and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, hollowed cheeks, the face of someone barely holding on. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Just a little longer." From the bedroom, she heard David shift in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Emma took a deep breath, stood, and walked back into the room to lie down beside the man who was going to kill her. Tomorrow she'd visit that coffee shop. Tomorrow she'd find another piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow she'd get closer to the truth. But tonight she had to sleep, or pretend to. One more night of survival in a marriage that had become a death sentence. The coffee shop was called Morningside Brew, a small independent place with exposed brick walls and mismatched vintage furniture. Emma sat in the corner by the window, nursing a latte she didn't want, watching the door. She'd called in sick to work, actually sick this time, or sick enough that the lie felt only partial. Her body was starting to rebel against the constant stress. Headaches, nausea, insomnia. The irony wasn't lost on her. David wouldn't even need to murder her. She might destroy herself first. She couldn't think that way. She had to stay sharp. The barista was young, maybe 25, with purple hair and multiple piercings. Emma approached the counter during a lull. "Hi, I was wondering if you could help me with something kind of unusual." The girl looked up from her phone. "Sure, what's up?" Emma pulled out her phone, showing a photo of David. She'd rehearsed this story. "My husband came here last Tuesday for a meeting. He left his wallet behind and we're trying to figure out who he was meeting so we can check if they found it. Long shot, but..." She shrugged helplessly. The barista studied the photo. "Oh yeah, I remember him. Good tipper. He was meeting that guy who comes in here a lot. Jeremy, I think his name is." Jeremy. Emma's heart rate accelerated. "Jeremy? Do you know his last name?" "Sorry, no, but he's here pretty regularly. Usually comes in around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Freelance something. He's always on his laptop." "What does he look like?" The barista described a man in his 30s, fit, usually wearing business casual clothing. Kind of intense looking, real serious, but polite. Emma thanked her and returned to her seat, mind racing. She had a first name now, Jeremy, a regular who met David at 2 p.m. last Tuesday for a conversation about killing his wife. She spent the next 3 hours waiting, drinking more coffee than was healthy, watching every man who entered. At 2:47 p.m., someone fitting the description walked in. Emma's breath caught. He was younger than David, maybe 35, with sharp features and calculating eyes. He wore dark jeans and a button-down shirt, carrying a sleek laptop bag. He ordered a black coffee and settled into a seat near the back, pulling out his computer. Emma watched him work for 20 minutes, memorizing every detail. The way he typed quickly, purposefully, how he occasionally paused to stare out the window, thinking, the expensive watch on his wrist, the confident way he carried himself. This was Jay. She was certain. But who was he? And why was he helping David murder her? Emma waited until he got up to use the restroom, then made her move. She approached his table quickly, glancing at his open laptop screen. An email was visible. Jeremy Hastings Consulting Services. Jeremy Hastings. She snapped a photo with her phone just as she heard the bathroom door open. Emma spun away, pretending to examine the community bulletin board nearby, heart hammering. Jeremy returned to his seat without noticing her. She gave it a few more minutes, then left, her legs shaky but her mind sharp. At home, Emma dove into research mode. Jeremy Hastings wasn't hard to find. He had a professional website, LinkedIn profile, even some news articles. He was a risk management consultant who'd previously worked in insurance fraud investigation. Emma read that last part 3 times. He'd worked in insurance fraud investigation. He knew exactly how to stage an accident that would pass scrutiny. He knew what investigators looked for, what would raise red flags, how to make murder look like tragedy. That's why David had hired him. Not just an accomplice, an expert. The website listed his services: asset protection, risk assessment, crisis management. Vague enough to be legal, specific enough that someone in David's position would know what he was really offering. Emma dug deeper. Jeremy Hastings had left his job as an investigator 5 years ago under unclear circumstances. There were hints of an ethics complaint, an investigation that went nowhere, a resignation rather than termination. Between the lines, Emma read a story of someone who'd learned the system well enough to beat it. She found his address, his vehicle registration, even his gym membership. The digital trail was extensive for someone in his line of work. Arrogant, she thought. Or confident he'd never be caught. Emma compiled everything into her growing file: photos, screenshots, notes. The evidence was building, but it still wasn't enough. She had messages that could be explained away. She had proof David met with someone who could theoretically help stage an accident. But she didn't have proof of an actual crime, just preparation for one. And preparation wasn't illegal. Planning murder was harder to prove than attempting it. Her phone buzzed. David. On my way home. Want me to grab dinner? Emma looked at the clock. 6:30 p.m. Where had the day gone? Sure, Ty? She texted back, maintaining normalcy. Perfect. See you soon. Love you. Emma stared at those words again. Did he mean them? Or were they just part of his cover? The performance of a devoted husband that would make her death even more tragic. more believable. She thought back to their early days, their first date at a comedy club, how hard he'd made her laugh, the weekend trip to Vermont where he'd told her he loved her for the first time, standing in front of a covered bridge in autumn, the way he'd proposed, nervous and earnest and so sure that she was the one he wanted to spend his life with. Had any of it been real? Or had she been a mark from the beginning? Emma realized with a start that she might never know the truth about their marriage. Even if she survived this, and she would survive, she was determined, she'd never know which parts of the past decade had been genuine and which had been manipulation. But that was tomorrow's grief. Tonight she had to keep playing her part, keep investigating, keep surviving. She heard David's car pull into the garage. Emma quickly closed her laptop and went to meet him, smile fixed in place, another performance in the longest, most important show of her life. "Hey, beautiful," David said, kissing her cheek. He held up bags of Thai food. "Got your favorite, pad Thai, extra peanuts." "Perfect," Emma said, taking the bags. "How was your day?" And just like that, they slipped back into their routine. Dinner conversation about work and weather and mundane details. Anyone watching would see a normal couple having a normal evening. No one would guess that the wife was investigating her husband for attempted murder, or that the husband was plotting his anniversary gift to be his wife's death. The surreal normalcy of it all was almost worse than the fear. Emma knew she needed to accelerate her timeline. Colorado was 5 weeks away. 5 weeks to build an airtight case, to ensure her survival, to outmaneuver a man who'd been planning this for months with expert help. She needed to force David's hand, make him reveal more of his plan. But how? The answer came to her while she was reviewing their calendar. David had a business trip scheduled for next week, 2 days in Chicago for a conference, 2 days when he'd be out of the house, 2 days when she could search their home thoroughly without fear of discovery. She'd already gone through his phone, his laptop, his desk. But people always hid the truly important things somewhere they thought was safe. A safe deposit box, maybe. Or a storage unit. Hidden files on a secondary device. Emma began her preparation carefully. She ordered a small surveillance camera online, the kind advertised for nannies and nervous homeowners. When it arrived, she hid it in their bedroom, angled to capture David's nightstand and dresser. She also set up a voice-activated recorder in his car, hidden under the passenger seat. If he was talking to Jeremy, or anyone else about his plan, she wanted to hear it. The night before his Chicago trip, Emma cooked David's favorite dinner: steak, roasted potatoes, asparagus. She opened a bottle of expensive wine, the kind they saved for celebrations. "What's the occasion?" David asked, pleased. "No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice for you before your trip." Emma smiled across the table. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." He reached for her hand. "Maybe you should come with me. Make it a mini vacation. A test? Or genuine?" Emma couldn't tell anymore. "I can't. Too much at work. But soon. The anniversary trip will be here before we know it." She watched his face carefully when she mentioned the anniversary. Did his expression flicker? Was there a moment of calculation behind his eyes? If there was, it passed quickly. "Can't wait," he said. "It's going to be unforgettable." That night, Emma pretended to fall asleep early. She lay in the dark, listening to David move around their bathroom, brush his teeth, set his alarm for the early morning flight. He climbed into bed beside her, and she felt him watch her in the darkness, the same way he'd watched her that first night after she'd discovered the messages. What was he thinking? Was he counting down the days? Reviewing his plan? Or did he feel nothing, his conscience fully anesthetized? Eventually, his breathing deepened into sleep. Emma waited another hour before carefully, silently getting out of bed. She moved through their house like a ghost, searching places she'd already searched, looking for what she might have missed. In David's home office, she found his filing cabinet locked, something that had never been locked before. Emma picked it carefully with a paperclip, a skill she'd learned years ago from a colleague at the law firm where she'd worked. Inside, she found the usual documents: tax returns, property records, birth certificates. But at the bottom of the bottom drawer, underneath a folder labeled Warranties, she found something else. A burner phone. Emma's hands trembled as she powered it on. It took a moment to boot up, and when it did, she saw exactly what she'd feared and hoped for. Messages between David and Jeremy, far more explicit than anything on his regular phone. Payment schedule needs to be arranged, Jeremy had written. Half now, half after. $50,000 now, $50,000 once it's done, David replied. Payment will come through the consulting fee structure we discussed. Acceptable. And you understand my services include alibi establishment, evidence coordination, and post-incident consultation? Yes, I need this to be airtight. No room for mistakes. There won't be any. I've done this before. Emma's vision went white at the edges. I've done this before. Jeremy Hastings wasn't just helping David murder her. He'd helped others. He was a professional. She photographed every message, hands shaking so badly she had to take several shots of each to ensure they were readable. The conversation went back months, all the way to September, before the insurance policy, before the anniversary trip planning. This had been in the works for nearly a year. The timeline was damning. September, first contact with Jeremy. October, detailed discussions about methods. November, insurance policy in place. December to February, refining the plan. March, payments begin. April, execution. Emma found payment records too, tucked into another folder. David had been moving money carefully, withdrawing cash in small amounts, depositing it into what appeared to be a consultancy account for risk management services. $50,000, paid over 3 months in increments small enough not to trigger automatic bank reporting requirements. He'd thought of everything, or almost everything. He hadn't counted on Emma finding his phone that night. Hadn't counted on her intelligence, her determination, her willingness to fight back. Emma spent 3 hours documenting everything she found, photographing, copying, memorizing. When she was done, she carefully replaced everything exactly as it had been, locked the filing cabinet, and returned to bed. David hadn't stirred. He slept peacefully, undisturbed by conscience or concern. Emma lay beside him, her mind cataloging everything she'd learned. She had evidence now, real evidence. Messages proving conspiracy, payment records showing transaction, a timeline showing premeditation. This was no longer speculation, this was proof. But it still wasn't enough to guarantee safety. David hadn't actually attempted anything yet. A good lawyer could argue this was all planning for a crime that never happened, that David had changed his mind, that the messages were taken out of context. No, Emma needed more. She needed to catch him in the act, or close enough that no jury would question his guilt. And to do that, she needed to let him think his plan was proceeding smoothly. She needed to go to Colorado. She needed to go on those hikes. She needed to become bait in a trap of her own design. The 2 days David spent in Chicago, Emma spent transforming from victim to survivor. She consulted with 3 attorneys without revealing her identity, using hypotheticals to understand her legal options. She researched private investigators, self-defense tactics, and documentation methods. She prepared. Most importantly, she went to the bank. Emma withdrew money carefully from their accounts, not enough to raise immediate alarm, but enough to give her resources. She opened a new account under her maiden name, one David didn't know about. She compiled copies of every important document, their financial records, property deeds, insurance policies. She created a safety deposit box and filled it with the evidence she'd gathered. Then she wrote a letter detailing everything she'd discovered, every message, every meeting, every piece of her investigation. She sealed it in an envelope marked, "To be opened in the event of my death," and gave it to her attorney with instructions. "If anything happens to me, anything suspicious, any accident, you open this and give it immediately to the police." The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Mendez, looked concerned. "Emma, are you in danger?" "I'm being careful," Emma said carefully. "This is just insurance." Insurance. The irony was bitter. Emma also reached out to her sister Rachel, who lived 3 states away. They hadn't been close lately, Life had gotten busy, communication had dwindled to holiday cards and occasional texts. But blood was blood. "I need to tell you something," Emma said when Rachel answered the phone, "and I need you to just listen without interrupting." She told her everything: the messages, the investigation, David's plan. Rachel's shocked silence was somehow worse than any exclamation would have been. "Emma, oh my God. You need to leave. Right now. Get out of that house." "I can't. Not yet. If I run, he wins. He gets the insurance money anyway after I'm declared dead, and he walks free. I need proof of attempted murder, not just conspiracy." "This is insane. You can't actually go to Colorado with him. You can't. Emma, he's going to kill you." "He's going to try," Emma corrected, "but I'll be ready." She explained her plan to Rachel. It was risky, incredibly risky, but it was the only way to ensure David faced real consequences, not just the slap on the wrist of conspiracy charges that might not even stick. Rachel argued, pleaded, threatened. Finally, reluctantly, she agreed to her part. "But if I don't hear from you at the exact times we agreed on, I'm calling the police immediately. I don't care about your plan." "Deal," Emma said. When David returned from Chicago, Emma greeted him with enthusiasm. How was the trip? Productive. Boring conference sessions. Usual networking. He dropped his bag, pulled her into a hug. "But I missed you." Standing in his embrace, Emma felt nothing. No love, no fear, no anger. Just cold determination. She'd moved beyond emotion into pure survival mode. "I missed you too," she said, the lie coming easily now. "And I have good news. I asked for time off for our anniversary trip. They approved 2 weeks." David pulled back, surprise and something else. Pleasure, relief, crossing his face. "Really? That's great. I thought about what you said. About disconnecting. About taking time for us. You're right. We need this. We really do." He kissed her forehead, and Emma wondered if he felt any guilt at all. If there was any part of the man she'd married still alive in there, screaming at him to stop. But his eyes showed only satisfaction. His plan was working. His victim was cooperating. That evening, they sat together planning the trip in more detail. David showed her the trails he'd researched, pointing out features on the maps. "This one is especially beautiful," he said, indicating a trail called Devil's Canyon. "It's challenging but not too difficult. And the waterfall at the end is supposed to be spectacular." Emma studied the map. The trail was remote, with several sections near steep drop-offs. Perfect for an accident. "Looks amazing," she said. "Maybe we should do this one toward the end of the trip? Build up to it?" "Good thinking." David made a note. "We'll do some easier hikes first, then tackle Devil's Canyon on day 5 or 6. Day 5 or 6. Emma marked it mentally. That's when he'd strike. Over the next 3 weeks, Emma fine-tuned her preparations. She took self-defense classes at a gym across town, telling David she was attending yoga. She learned how to fall safely, how to protect her head, how to fight back if necessary. She also contacted a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a retired detective recommended by one of the attorneys she'd consulted. She met him at a diner far from her neighborhood. "I need surveillance," Emma said, sliding a folder across the table. "This man, Jeremy Hastings, is being paid to help my husband kill me. I need to know everything about him. His schedule, his contacts, his vulnerabilities." Marcus, a weathered man in his 60s with shrewd eyes, flipped through the documents she'd compiled. He let out a low whistle. "You've done good work here. Very thorough. I'm running out of time." "Give me a week," Marcus said. "I'll get you what you need." True to his word, Marcus delivered. Jeremy Hastings had a gambling problem, significant debts, and a pattern of helping wealthy clients solve problems for large fees. He'd been investigated twice before, but never charged. Witnesses had disappeared or refused to testify. He was careful, professional, and completely amoral. But he had weaknesses. He frequented a particular casino. He had an ex-wife who hated him, and he kept meticulous records, an occupational habit from his investigator days that could be turned against him. If we can get access to his files, Marcus said, we'd have proof of other crimes. That gives us leverage. How do we get access? Marcus smiled grimly. Let me worry about that. You focus on staying alive. The day before the Colorado trip, Emma had everything in place. Her attorney had her letter. Rachel knew the plan and the check-in schedule. Marcus had begun his work on Jeremy. The surveillance equipment she'd ordered, small, easily concealed cameras and a GPS tracker, was packed in her luggage. And Emma had one more trick up her sleeve. A small voice recorder, the kind used for lectures, sewn into the lining of the backpack she'd carry on every hike. Whatever David said, whatever he did, it would be recorded. That night, their last night before the trip, David made love to her. Emma endured it, her mind detached, clinical. Afterward, he held her close. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I know I don't say it enough, but I really do love you. Emma wondered if he was trying to convince her or himself. I love you too, she said, and maybe once, in some version of their life that no longer existed, it had been true. She lay awake long after he fell asleep, watching the ceiling, feeling the weight of what was coming. In less than 24 hours, they'd board a plane to Colorado. In less than a week, David would try to kill her, and she'd have to let him get close enough to try while stopping him before he succeeded. The margin for error was razor thin. If she miscalculated, if she missed a warning sign, if David's plan was different than what she'd anticipated, she'd be dead. But if she did nothing, she'd be dead anyway. At least this way, she was fighting back. I'm ready, Emma whispered to the darkness. Whatever happens, I'm ready. From beside her, David slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams a murderer dreams. The mountains were beautiful. Emma stood on the balcony of their rented cabin, looking out at the peaks rising against the brilliant blue sky, and thought how wrong it was that somewhere so stunning was meant to be her grave. Amazing view, right? David came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Worth the trip? Definitely, Emma said, leaning back against him, playing the part. Inside, her heart was a drum. The cabin was perfect. Too perfect. Remote, at the end of a long private road with no neighbors in sight. David had chosen well. If something happened here, there'd be no witnesses. But Emma had expected that. She'd already placed her cameras strategically. One in the bedroom, one in the living area, one on the porch facing the driveway. They spent the first day settling in, walking the nearby trails, acting like tourists. David was attentive, loving even. He took photos of Emma against the mountain backdrop, held her hand as they explored, cooked dinner with the groceries they'd picked up in town. Emma checked in with Rachel at exactly 8 p.m., sending a coded text that meant, Day 1, all clear. The second day, they tackled an easy trail. Emma stayed alert for any sign of danger, a loose rock, a sudden shove, anything. But David was a perfect hiking companion, pointing out wildflowers and helping her over rough patches. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe ... Number. Emma stopped that line of thinking. She'd seen the messages. She knew the plan. David was just being patient, waiting for the right moment. That night, after David fell asleep, Emma checked the recordings from her hidden cameras. There was nothing incriminating, just a couple enjoying a vacation. But she did notice David checking his phone frequently when he thought she wasn't looking. On the third day, they drove to a more challenging trail. The hike was spectacular but strenuous, with several sections that ran along cliff edges. Emma's nerves were wire-tight, hyper-aware of David's position behind her, the drop-offs to her side. You okay? David called as she paused to catch her breath. Fine. Just taking in the view. She was actually checking her position, making sure she stayed away from the edges, never giving him an opportunity. They reached the summit without incident. The view was breathtaking, miles of mountain ranges, forests, valleys. Emma took photos, and David took photos of her. You look beautiful, he said, reviewing the images. Happy. I am happy, Emma lied. She was exhausted, terrified, running on adrenaline and determination. On the descent, David slipped on loose rocks. Emma instinctively reached out to steady him, and for a moment their positions were reversed. She was the one who could send him tumbling. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thanks, David said, regaining his footing. That could have been bad. We have to be careful out here, Emma said meaningfully. That night, day 3 check-in with Rachel went smoothly, but Emma noticed something. David had been texting someone throughout the day, short messages that he quickly deleted. After he went to bed, Emma retrieved his phone and checked the deleted messages folder, a trick she'd learned early in her investigation. The messages were to Jeremy. Day 3. No opportunities yet. Be patient. Don't force it. I know. Just ready for this to be over. It will be soon. Day 5 or 6 like we discussed. Devil's Canyon is perfect. Emma's blood ran cold. Devil's Canyon. Tomorrow they had a rest day, then Devil's Canyon on day 5. That's when it would happen. She had 2 days to prepare. Emma spent the rest day claiming she needed to recover from yesterday's hike. In truth, she used the time to scout Devil's Canyon herself, driving there alone while David napped, claiming she was going into town for supplies. The trail was as dangerous as it looked on the maps. Multiple sections ran along narrow paths beside 100-foot drops. There were places where a person could easily slip, especially if pushed. And the trail was remote enough that even on a busy weekend, hikers might go an hour without seeing others. Emma photographed everything, noting the danger points, planning her strategy. She couldn't avoid the hike. Refusing would raise David's suspicions and might make him change tactics to something she couldn't anticipate. But she could control where she walked, how she positioned herself when she was most vulnerable. She also did something else. She called Marcus Webb. I need you to be in Colorado on day 5, she said. Devil's Canyon Trail. I can't explain everything now, but I need backup. I'll be there, Marcus said without hesitation. Where and when? Emma gave him the details. Stay hidden. I'll signal if I need help. But if anything happens to me, anything, you call the police immediately and tell them everything. Emma, are you sure about this? This is dangerous as hell. I'm sure. It's the only way. On day 4, the day before Devil's Canyon, Emma woke to find David already dressed and on his phone. He quickly hung up when she entered the living room. Morning, he said, smiling. Sleep well? Like a rock. Who are you talking to? Work. Some crisis they need help with. The lie came easily. Nothing that can't wait, though. Today is about us. They spent the day in town, shopping for souvenirs, eating at local restaurants, being a normal couple. Emma watched David's face, searching for signs of anxiety or guilt, but he seemed relaxed, content even. Sociopath, she thought. He has to be. No normal person could be this calm before murdering their spouse. That evening, as they sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset, David opened a bottle of wine. To tomorrow, he said, raising his glass. Devil's Canyon, the highlight of our trip. To tomorrow, Emma echoed, clinking her glass against his. She pretended to drink but barely sipped. She needed to stay sharp, alert. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. Tomorrow, one of them might die. Emma went to bed early, claiming exhaustion. She lay in the dark, listening to David move around the cabin. She heard him on his phone again, speaking in low tones she couldn't quite make out. Finally, he came to bed. Emma kept her breathing steady, feigning sleep. She felt him lie down beside her, felt his eyes on her in the darkness. I'm sorry. He whispered so quietly she almost didn't hear it. I'm so sorry. Emma's eyes snapped open in the dark, but she didn't move. Was that remorse? Second thoughts? Or just another performance? She'd find out tomorrow. On Devil's Canyon, everything would be decided. The morning of day 5 dawned clear and cold. Emma dressed in layers, checking that the voice recorder in her backpack was working, that her phone was fully charged, that the small canister of pepper spray she'd hidden in her jacket pocket was accessible. David was cheerful at breakfast, almost manic with energy. "Beautiful day for a hike. You ready?" "Ready," Emma said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. They drove to the trailhead in David's rental car. Emma noted that there were only 2 other vehicles in the small parking lot. Devil's Canyon wasn't a popular trail on weekdays. That was good for David's plan, not so good for hers. But Marcus should be somewhere nearby. That thought gave her courage. The trail started innocently enough, winding through pine forests with gentle elevation changes. They hiked in comfortable silence, David leading the way. Emma stayed several feet behind him, keeping distance between them, staying alert. After about 40 minutes, they reached the first dangerous section, a narrow path running along a cliff face with a steep drop to the right. The trail was maybe 3 feet wide, with rocks on the left and a sheer drop on the right. Emma's heart rate accelerated. This was it. This was where it could happen. "You okay?" David asked, turning back. "We can take it slow." "I'm fine." Emma moved carefully along the cliff path, staying as close to the rock wall as possible, watching David's position ahead of her. But nothing happened. They crossed the dangerous section without incident and continued into the canyon. Another hour of hiking brought them deeper into the wilderness. The walls of the canyon rose on either side, red and orange stone sculpted by millennia of wind and water. It was stunning. It was also isolating. Emma checked her phone. No signal. She'd expected that, but it meant she was truly alone out here with a man who wanted her dead. They stopped for water at a small clearing. David pulled out the sandwiches he'd packed. "Lunch?" Emma wasn't hungry but forced herself to eat. She needed energy, needed to stay strong. "This is incredible," David said, looking around. "Worth all the planning." Was that a double meaning? Emma couldn't tell. After lunch, they continued. The trail wound deeper into the canyon, eventually leading to the waterfall they'd come to see. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they approached. And then they were there. Devil's Canyon Falls cascaded down a 100-foot cliff face into a pool of crystal-clear water. The pool emptied into a narrow stream that ran along the trail for a stretch before disappearing underground. It was breathtaking. It was also the most remote, isolated spot they'd encountered. Emma felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. If David was going to make his move, it would be here. "Let's get closer to the falls," David suggested. "There's a path down to the pool." The path was steep and rocky, requiring both hands for balance. One section involved a scramble down a near-vertical rock face beside the waterfall. Below, the pool was deep, surrounded by slick rocks. Emma saw it all at once, how easy it would be to slip on the wet rocks, hit her head, fall into the pool. Tragic drowning, devastated husband, perfect accident. "I don't know," Emma said slowly. "It looks pretty dangerous." "Come on, we came all this way. It'll be worth it." David had already started down. "I'll go first, help you." Emma followed reluctantly, every sense on high alert. The rocks were slippery with spray from the waterfall. The sound of rushing water was deafening, drowning out all other sound. David reached the bottom and turned back, reaching up to help her. "Careful. Take your time." Emma climbed down slowly. When she was about 6 feet from the bottom, she saw it. David's stance had changed. He wasn't bracing to catch her anymore. His weight was balanced differently. He was preparing to pull, not catch. Time seemed to slow. Emma saw the calculation in his eyes, saw the moment he made his decision. His hands reached up toward her, but not to help. To yank her forward, to send her tumbling onto the rocks below, into the pool. Emma had prepared for this. As David's hands closed on her wrist and pulled, Emma didn't resist. Instead, she used his own momentum against him, pivoting and jumping to the side instead of forward. David, expecting resistance, stumbled off balance. For a terrible moment, they both teetered on the edge of the rocks. Emma grabbed a jutting stone to steady herself. David had nothing to grab. "Emma!" he shouted, genuine fear in his voice as he felt himself falling. Instinct. Or something else. something she'd have to examine later, made Emma reach out. She caught his arm, bracing against the rock, holding him. They stayed frozen like that, David's weight pulling her toward the edge, Emma's grip on the rock the only thing keeping them both from falling. "Help me up," David gasped. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, Emma saw it all, the fear, the guilt, the realization that his plan had failed. "Why?" Emma asked. The question came out as almost a sob. "Why, David?" "I can explain. Please, Emma, pull me up. Tell me why." "The money, I got in trouble. The company is investigating me for embezzlement. I needed the insurance money. Please." There it was. The truth, finally. Not a loveless marriage or a midlife crisis, just greed and desperation. Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Part of her wanted to let go, wanted to let David fall, to end this nightmare the way he'd planned to end hers. But she wasn't a killer. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, Emma pulled. Slowly, inch by inch, she hauled David back up onto the rocks. They collapsed together, both breathing hard. "Thank you," David gasped. "Oh God, Emma, thank you." "Don't." Emma pulled away from him, digging in her pocket. "Don't say another word." She pulled out her phone and held it up. "No signal, but I've been recording this whole conversation on a device in my backpack. I have recordings of you planning my murder with Jeremy Hastings. I have your text messages, your payment records, everything." David's face went white. "Emma, I can explain." "I don't want your explanations. I want you to walk back up this trail, get in the car and drive us back to the cabin. And then you're going to wait while I call the police." "I can't." "Emma, please, if the company finds out, if I go to prison—" "You should have thought of that before you tried to murder me for the insurance money." Emma's voice was steel. She'd been afraid for so long, but now, with the truth finally out, all she felt was cold fury. David stared at her, and Emma saw the moment he considered running, or fighting, or any number of desperate options. "There's a private investigator on this trail right now," Emma said quietly, "watching us. If anything happens to me, he has instructions to go to the police with everything I've compiled. You can't win this, David. It's over." It was a bluff. Marcus was supposed to be nearby, but Emma didn't actually know where. But it worked. David's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." They climbed back up to the trail in silence. Emma stayed behind David the entire way, watching his every move. When they reached the top, she saw a figure emerge from the trees. Marcus Webb. He'd been there after all. "Everything okay?" Marcus called out, his hand resting meaningfully on his hip where Emma knew he carried a concealed weapon. "We're fine," Emma said. "We're heading back now." The hike out was the longest of Emma's life. David didn't speak. Marcus followed at a distance, a silent guardian. Emma's mind was numb, unable to process what had just happened. She'd almost died. She'd saved David's life. She'd caught her husband trying to murder her. It was over. But somehow it didn't feel real. The cabin was exactly as they'd left it that morning. Coffee cup still on the counter, bed unmade. The ordinary remnants of a vacation that had become anything but ordinary. Emma sat at the kitchen table while Marcus stood guard and David slumped in a chair by the window. She held her phone, staring at the numbers 911, trying to make her fingers dial. This was the moment. Once she made the call, everything would change. There'd be police, lawyers, trials. Her private nightmare would become public spectacle. Her marriage, whatever it had been, would be dissected by strangers. But the alternative was letting David go free. Letting him potentially hurt someone else. Letting him get away with trying to kill her. Emma pressed call. 911, what's your emergency? My husband tried to kill me, Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady. I need to report an attempted murder. The police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers from the county sheriff's department, skeptical at first, then increasingly grave as Emma showed them her evidence. The recordings, the messages, the financial records. The voice recording from the backpack that had captured David's confession at the waterfall. David sat silently through it all. He didn't deny anything, didn't ask for a lawyer, just stared at the floor while his world collapsed around him. Detective Sarah Chen arrived an hour later. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to Emma's entire story, taking careful notes, asking pointed questions. "You put yourself in incredible danger," Chen said when Emma finished. "If anything had gone wrong." "I know, but I needed proof. I needed him to actually try so there was no doubt." "You got it. Between the recording, the text messages, and the financial trail, we have more than enough for attempted murder and conspiracy charges." Chen paused. "Mrs. Chen, can I still call you that?" Emma flinched. She and David shared a last name. That would have to change. Everything would have to change. "Emma is fine." "Emma, I need to ask you something. Why didn't you come to us sooner, when you first found the messages?" Emma had expected this question. Would you have been able to arrest him? Based just on text messages that could be explained away as fiction or jokes? Chen was silent for a moment. Probably not. Not without more evidence. But we could have provided protection, helped you gather evidence safely. Maybe. Or maybe he would have been tipped off and changed his approach to something I couldn't anticipate. Emma met the detective's eyes. I did what I had to do to survive. Chen nodded slowly. I understand. And for what it's worth, you did good work documenting everything. You should consider a career in law enforcement. Emma almost laughed. After this, she never wanted to investigate anything again. David was arrested and taken into custody. As the officers led him past Emma, he paused. I'm sorry, he said. For whatever that's worth, I'm really sorry. Emma looked at this man she'd loved, this stranger who'd worn her husband's face while planning her death. Were you ever going to go through with it? Or would you have backed out at the last second? David looked away. I don't know. I really don't know. Emma decided that was probably the most honest thing he'd said in months. The next days were a blur. Statements to police, calls with lawyers, media attention when the story leaked. Woman discovers husband's murder plot, catches him in the act. Emma's face was on the news, her story dissected by strangers online. Some praised her courage. Others questioned why she'd stayed, why she'd put herself in danger, why she hadn't just left. Emma tried not to read the comments, but sometimes couldn't help herself. She should have just divorced him. People wrote, as if it were that simple, as if leaving would have kept her safe, as if David wouldn't have come after her anyway, making her death look like a robbery gone wrong or a carjacking. Jeremy Hastings was arrested 3 days later. Detective Chen called Emma personally to let her know. He tried to run, got as far as the Canadian border before we picked him up. Chen sounded satisfied. His lawyer's already talking plea deal, which means he's going to give us information on other cases. Turns out you weren't the first wife he'd helped someone try to kill. Emma felt sick. How many? At least 3 that we can prove so far. One of them died. The other 2 were ruled accidents, but we're reopening the investigations. 2 other women who'd almost shared her fate. One who hadn't been as lucky or as paranoid or as prepared. Will they testify? Emma asked. If they're willing. And I think once they know they're not alone, they will be. The legal process ground forward. David was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. Bail was denied. He'd sit in jail until his trial. Emma filed for divorce the same week. Her attorney, Patricia Mendez, handled everything with brisk efficiency. You'll get the house, the accounts, everything, Patricia said. He has no leg to stand on. Emma didn't care about the money. She just wanted it over. 6 weeks after the events at Devil's Canyon, Emma sat in a therapist's office, trying to explain how she felt. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again, she admitted. If David could fool me for 10 years, if I could share my life with someone capable of that, how do I know I won't make the same mistake again? Dr. Sarah Kim, A trauma specialist recommended by the district attorney's office leaned forward. You didn't make a mistake. David made choices. He chose to defraud his company. He chose to plan murder instead of asking for help or declaring bankruptcy or any number of legal options. You're not responsible for his decisions. But I should have seen the signs. Should have known. People who plan murder for money are often very good at deception. That's not a reflection on you. That's a reflection on him. Emma wanted to believe that. But late at night, alone in the house that no longer felt like home, she wondered. Had there been moments when the mask slipped? Had she ignored warning signs because it was easier than confronting an uncomfortable truth? She'd never know. And maybe that was okay. Maybe she didn't need to know. David's trial began in October, 6 months after his arrest. Emma sat in the courtroom every day, watching the man she'd married reduced to a defendant in an orange jumpsuit. The prosecution built their case methodically. The text messages, the financial records, the testimony from Jeremy Hastings, who'd taken a plea deal in exchange for testifying against David. The recording from Devil's Canyon, David's own voice confessing to the murder plot. The defense tried to argue that David had never actually intended to go through with it, that he'd gotten cold feet, that Emma had misinterpreted his actions at the waterfall. My client made terrible decisions, his lawyer argued. He got involved in a fantasy, a dark what-if scenario that spiraled out of control. But when the moment came, he couldn't do it. The evidence shows Mrs. Chen slipped, and Mr. Chen tried to save her. Emma listened to her attempted murder being reframed as a hiking accident and a misunderstanding. Listened to David's lawyer paint her as paranoid, as someone who'd created an elaborate narrative out of her own insecurities. It was infuriating. It was gaslighting on a legal scale. But the jury didn't buy it. Marcus Webb testified about what he'd seen at Devil's Canyon, David's positioning, the deliberate pull rather than catch. Detective Chen walked the jury through the evidence, the pattern of planning, the payments to Jeremy. And then Emma took the stand. She'd been dreading this, having to relive everything, to expose her pain and fear to a courtroom of strangers. But when the moment came, she found her voice steady. She told the jury about finding the messages, about the months of investigation, about the terror of sleeping beside someone who wanted her dead, about Devil's Canyon and David's confession. Do you have any doubt, the prosecutor asked, that your husband intended to kill you that day? No doubt at all, Emma said, looking directly at David. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He planned it for months. He paid someone $50,000 to help him, and at that waterfall, he tried to make it happen. David's lawyer cross-examined her aggressively, trying to poke holes in her timeline, her evidence, her interpretations. But Emma had lived this nightmare. She knew every detail intimately. Isn't it possible, the defense attorney pressed, that you misread your husband's intent? That you were so convinced he wanted to hurt you that you saw malice where there was none? I have his confession on tape, Emma said quietly. His own words admitting he needed the insurance money to cover his embezzlement. Those aren't my interpretations. That's his truth. The trial lasted 3 weeks. On a gray November afternoon, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. David showed no reaction when the verdict was read. Just sat there, staring straight ahead as the judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing. Emma felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Just exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around, shouting questions. Emma let Patricia Mendez handle them, standing silent while her lawyer read a prepared statement. Mrs. Chen is grateful for the jury's verdict and the justice system's thorough handling of this case. She hopes her experience will encourage other people in dangerous situations to seek help and to trust their instincts. She asks for privacy as she continues to heal from this trauma. Short, simple, final. Emma went home, to her new apartment, not the house she'd shared with David, which was being sold, and sat in the silence. She'd won. She'd survived. Justice had been served. So why did she feel so empty? Sentencing came 2 weeks later. David received 25 years for attempted murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. He'd be eligible for parole after 17 years, but the judge made it clear he was unlikely to receive it. "You spent months planning to kill the woman you'd vowed to love and protect," Judge Martinez said, her voice hard. "You terrorized her, betrayed her, and attempted to end her life for financial gain. Your actions show a level of calculation and callousness that warrants significant punishment." David finally spoke then, asking to address the court. Emma braced herself. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," David said, his voice breaking. "I know I can never make this right. I want Emma to know that I loved her. I did love her. I made terrible choices. I got desperate, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I—" He stopped, overcome. Emma listened to his words and felt pity. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe never. But pity for someone who destroyed his own life along with hers. The divorce was finalized in December. Emma Chen became Emma Walsh again, reclaiming her maiden name. She sold the house, split the assets, and tried to move forward. But moving forward was harder than she'd anticipated. The trial had been a goal, something to focus on. Now, with David in prison and the legal proceedings finished, Emma faced the harder work of actually healing. She continued therapy twice a week. Dr. Kim helped her process the trauma, the trust issues, the way her entire sense of reality had been shattered. "It's not just about what David did," Emma said during one session. "It's about what it means about me. How could I not know? How could I live with someone for 10 years and not see what he was capable of?" "Abusers are skilled at compartmentalization," Dr. Kim said gently. "David lived a double life, devoted husband and murderous schemer. That's not about your perception. That's about his ability to deceive." Emma also joined a support group for people who'd survived intimate partner violence. Hearing other stories, women and men who'd been through similar betrayals, helped her feel less alone. "My husband poisoned my coffee every morning for 3 months," one woman shared. "Small amounts, making me sick but not killing me. Building up to it. When I finally figured it out, everyone asked why I'd stayed, as if I'd known. Mine pushed me down the stairs and then called 911, crying about how I'd fallen," another woman said. "I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. He brought me flowers every day. The nurses thought he was so devoted." These stories were devastating, but they also validated Emma's experience. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't crazy. She was a survivor. Slowly, month by month, Emma began to rebuild her life. She changed careers, leaving corporate compliance to work with a nonprofit helping domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system. She moved to a new city, wanting a fresh start. She also started dating again, though carefully. Every new person came with the anxiety. What if I'm wrong again? What if I miss the signs? But Dr. Kim helped her understand the difference between healthy caution and letting fear control her life. "You'll never have absolute certainty with anyone," Dr. Kim said. "But you can learn to trust your instincts, set boundaries, and know you have the strength to leave if something feels wrong." Emma went on a few dates. Some went nowhere. One developed into a short relationship that ended amicably when they realized they wanted different things. Each experience was practice in trusting herself again. The second anniversary of Devil's Canyon came and went. Emma spent it hiking a local trail, safe, well-traveled, with friends, reclaiming the activity that David had tried to weaponize against her. She'd thought she might feel triumphant standing on that summit, proof that she'd survived and thrived. Instead, she just felt peaceful. That evening she received an unexpected letter. It was from David. Emma almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity, and maybe a need for closure, made her read it. "Dear Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. I've spent the past 2 years in prison trying to understand how I became the person who could plan to murder his wife. Therapy, reflection, all of it. I still don't have a good answer. I was desperate. I'd embezzled money trying to cover losses from bad investments. The company was closing in. I panicked. But none of that excuses what I did. Nothing excuses it. I wanted you to know that you weren't wrong about our marriage. The love was real, at least in the beginning. I don't know when it stopped being real for me, when I started seeing you as a solution to my problems instead of a person I cherished. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe there was a specific moment. I don't know. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were never the problem. You were smart, careful, and brave. You saved your own life. I'm glad you did. I hope you're healing. I hope you found peace. And I hope someday you can trust someone again, because you deserve that happiness. David. Emma read the letter 3 times. She didn't know if David meant any of it, or if this was another manipulation, but it didn't matter. She didn't need his permission to move on, or his validation to trust her own perceptions. She put the letter in a box with all the other documentation from that period of her life. A box she kept in the back of her closet, not thrown away but not actively examined. Her past, acknowledged but not dwelling. And then, Emma Walsh went back to her life. Her new job helping survivors. Her new apartment with the good light. Her new friends who knew her story but didn't define her by it. She was more than what David had tried to make her. A victim, a statistic, a tragic accident. She was a survivor, she was strong, she was healing, and she was finally, slowly, learning to trust herself again. The coffee shop was warm and busy on a Sunday morning. Emma sat by the window working on her laptop when someone approached her table. "Excuse me, are you Emma Walsh?" Emma looked up. A young woman, maybe 25, stood nervously clutching a coffee cup. "Yes?" "I thought I recognized you from the news stories. I'm sorry to bother you, but I needed to thank you." "Thank me?" The woman sat down uninvited, words tumbling out. 3 years ago, my husband started acting strange. Secretive phone calls, new insurance policies, suggesting dangerous activities we'd never done before. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. But then I read about your case and I realized I wasn't crazy. I hired an investigator, found out he was planning, well, something like what happened to you. Emma felt her chest tighten. "What did you do?" "I left, got a restraining order, built a case. He's in prison now." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "If I hadn't read your story, if I hadn't known it was possible, I don't think I'd be alive. So thank you for speaking out, for being brave." Emma reached across the table and squeezed the woman's hand. "You're the one who was brave. You trusted your instincts. That's what saved you." After the woman left, Emma sat thinking. She'd told her story in interviews, written an article for a women's magazine, even given a TED Talk about trusting intuition and recognizing danger signs. She'd done it hoping to help others, but hearing it had actually worked, actually saved a life. That was different. Her phone buzzed. A text from Noah, the man she'd been dating for 8 months. "Still on for dinner tonight? My place, 7. Emma smiled. Noah knew her story. She told him on their 3rd date, wanting to be honest about her past, her fears, her walls. He'd listened carefully and said, "That must have been terrifying. But look at you now. You survived something unimaginable, and you're still here, still trusting people enough to go on dates with strangers. That's pretty incredible." He was patient with her boundaries, understood when she needed space, never pressured her. And slowly, carefully, Emma had learned to trust again. Not blindly, she'd never be that naive again, but trust built on communication, consistency, and mutual respect. Looking forward to it, Emma texted back. Her laptop dinged with an email notification. The subject line read, "Legal consultation request." Emma opened it. A woman in another state, recently discovering her partner's plan to harm her, had found Emma's nonprofit and wanted help. Emma quickly typed a response, connecting her with resources, offering to schedule a call. This was her life now, using her experience to help others, building something meaningful from trauma. Her phone rang, Detective Sarah Chen, who'd become a friend over the years. "Emma, Wanted to give you a heads up. David's parole hearing is next month. Emma's stomach clenched. It had been 5 years. She'd known this was coming but had tried not to think about it. Will you testify? Chen asked. Do I need to? Honestly? With his record in prison, he's been written up twice for contraband, once for fighting. I don't think he has much chance. But victim impact statements always carry weight. Emma thought about it. Did she want to stand in front of David again? Relive everything? Or was she done giving him any space in her life? I'll think about it, Emma said. After hanging up, she stared out the window at the busy street. People going about their normal days, unaware of the darkness that could lurk in familiar spaces. She'd been one of them once, naive to the danger sleeping next to her. But she wasn't that person anymore. Emma opened her document folder and found the victim impact statement she'd written for David's sentencing. She could update it, make it current, or she could write something new, or she could choose not to go at all, choose to move forward without looking back. Emma thought about the young woman who'd approached her earlier, about the email she'd just received from another survivor, about Noah waiting for her with dinner plans and genuine affection, about her work, her friends, her new life built from the ashes of the old one. She'd spent enough time looking at David Chen, giving him space in her thoughts, being defined by what he'd tried to do to her. Emma closed the document and opened a new one, beginning to type. Reflections on survival, 5 years after my husband tried to kill me. People often ask if I'm angry, if I hate David for what he did. The honest answer is, sometimes, but not as much as you'd think. What he tried to take from me, my life, my trust, my sense of safety, I've slowly rebuilt. I'm not the same person I was before, but I'm not sure I'd want to be. Before, I trusted blindly. Now I trust carefully, with boundaries and awareness. Before, I thought I needed to see the best in everyone. Now I know it's okay to see people clearly, flaws and all, and choose whether they deserve space in my life. The woman I was before Devil's Canyon was naive, but happy. The woman I am now is cautious, but strong. I'm not sure which version is better. I'm just grateful I get to be a version at all. To anyone reading this who feels the prickling unease I once felt, who notices things that don't quite add up, who is told they're paranoid or oversensitive, trust yourself. Your instincts exist for a reason. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. And to anyone who has survived what I survived, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are not defined by what was done to you. You are a survivor. And that is enough. Emma saved the document. She'd send it to the online magazine that had asked her to write about her experience. Then she'd close her laptop, go home to get ready for her date, and live her life. The parole hearing would happen with or without her testimony. David would get parole, or he wouldn't. Either way, Emma would be okay. She'd faced death and survived. Everything else was just details. As Emma packed up her things and stepped out into the sunshine, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of the past was still there. It always would be, but it no longer crushed her. She'd made it to the other side of the nightmare. Not unchanged, but unbroken. And that, Emma thought as she walked down the busy street toward her new life, was its own kind of victory. The end.